Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Operation Resources webinar on stress mastery, from feeling stuck to feeling free. My name is James Campbell, and I'm the Senior Manager of Industry Relations with the National Apartment Association. I want to welcome all of our members in attendance. Thank you for joining us for this important topic. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our website and YouTube channel next week. You may then share this presentation with those colleagues and friends who are unable to attend at present. Also, we have a lot of time at the end of today's presentation for live questions and answers. You may type your questions into the chat box on your screen, and we will share them with our presenter. Now, I am pleased to turn the presentation over to our host, John Sons, who is Director of Training and Marketing Strategies of Burlington Capital Properties and Chairman of the Operations Subcommittee on Mental Health. John?
Thank you, James, and welcome to today's webinar, which I'm sure you'll find both enlightening and applicable. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter. I'm just super excited to introduce Sara. Sara Regester is a registered nurse, stress mastery expert, and Duke-trained, nationally board-certified health and wellness coach. She's the founder of Directions for Wellness, an international health and lifestyle consulting practice. Sara has done tremendous work with the U.S. Veterans Administration and brings 3 decades of experience in this field. Welcome aboard, Sara. We're greatly looking forward to your presentation today.
Great. Thank you, John, for that invitation to talk about stress. And welcome everyone for taking the time in your day to connect again to another virtual opportunity. Part of us wants to think, oh my gosh, have I had enough of this virtual? Another part says, yes, I need help with my stress. And so today's workshop, and I do say workshop because I'm actually in this time we have together, it's my intention to really share with you some understanding about stress in terms of how you can be more resilient, less reactive, more responsive. And the information that I share today will actually apply to you specifically in a way that you can bring these tools to work and in your leadership in the workplace, and you can bring them home and use them with your family and those key people that are so important to you in your life. And so we're going to dive a little deeper to give you an understanding of stress, and more importantly, how you can rewire your stress response in a way that when I say stress mastery, it's not about reducing stress. It's not about managing stress. This workshop today is the reality when stress hits. How can you find a more productive way to actually meet your stress so that you don't wipe yourself out and you actually perhaps can even grow from that opportunity that the stress is presenting. So when we say stress mastery, from feeling stuck to feeling free, we really are going to look at a new kind of opportunity to rewire your stress response so you can start having, more resilience in how you're doing your work and how you're engaging with your family. And so you did hear my bio at the start, but just to be in full disclosure, I've been a registered nurse for many, many years in a major medical center. And that's really where I learned, the feet on the street with stress, because I was a stellar nurse, and I aspired to be the best healthcare practitioner I could be. And in that, I wiped out my health many, many times from my stress. And I saw the stress in my patients and their families. And I really watched, how people met these life and death experiences and how some patients got better and walked out of the hospital and other patients didn't fare so well. And in that time as a registered nurse, there were several times when I wiped out my own health. I would go off track to kind of take care of myself, get well, and then I'd get back into the pattern and wipe out my health again in a really significant way. Until one day I had this epiphany and I thought, wow, isn't it interesting that the harder I push to be successful, the more it wipes out my health. And some of you out there might have a similar story professionally, that you know that there's a certain point where when you're pushing and striving for success, or when you really care about things, that it really can show up in your health ultimately when your life is out of balance. And for me, it was not having boundaries, never saying no, always saying yes to opportunities, taking on the hardest cases, taking on the extra committees, all the things I did. And it really didn't serve me well. And so I can, in full disclosure, let you know that I am a stress junkie. And in studying stress resilience is really where my unique, I would say, superpower or secret sauce is that I studied shamanism, that kind of nature, using nature and very ancient wisdom as a way to understand that mind, body, spirit approach to health and wellness. And we call this in this era integrative medicine. And so I'm an integrative health coach, as you heard in my bio. But what I really bring forward is an opportunity to transform and heal in a mind, body, spirit of how stress is really a symptom of perhaps what you're resisting. And so today I have on this slide an opportunity. If you want to visit my website, you're welcome to. It's directionsforwellness.com. You'll see a link to download a free ebook, How to Grow from Your Stress. And it is actually a book that will come to you as a PDF, and it will go through the different types of stress. For example, the health wipeout, the do-gooder syndrome, the relationship sabotage, what flavor is your stress and how it's impacting you, and then actually give you some tips of how to meet that stress successfully. So I offer that today for you if you choose to have something to walk away with. Oh, and here's my information. So I'll show this slide at the end so you don't have to distract yourself with going there now. So my first question to this group as we dive into this very relevant topic is, think in the past year, like you always might have had different forms of stress and busyness in your life, but this last kind of COVID era has really turned up the volume on chaos, of the unknown, of change, and that there's been a lot of stress related to having to be online and having to work from home and having your kids attend school at home. And I can imagine too, with this industry that you're in, all of the ripple effect of people's income and their living situations and their ability to make, their life expenses. And all of this has had a huge effect that has created stress on many, many levels. And so what this workshop will offer you today is, in terms of leadership, how can you as a leader be more resilient, more responsive, and non-reactive? And this is what we talk about with stress resilience. It's a mindset, an attitude and approach, and some tools and skills that you can practice to kind of rewire your stress response. And one of the things that's really true about our stress, if you reflect on your typical stress triggers, it's not just about being busy and overwhelmed and overcommitted. That's one part of stress. But there's another part, the real sweet spot to the stress that I'm going to talk about today is that stress on the inside, and where often our stress is a symptom of what you might be resisting, either because you're having competing values, because there's internal perhaps insecurity or challenges or conflict, or there's a bigger step you need to take, or whatever it is. That resistance is like the other train track that's running parallel to our stress many times. And it's the resistance that can really create this exhaustion and this kind of push-pull of how our energy is trying to move forward, and then we hold ourselves back. And so the resistance is definitely part of stress, and we'll be taking a look at that today as well. So what's really important, if we really unpack stress, is that you open the door to stress when something you care about is at stake. If you didn't care about it, you would not be stressed about it. And so what's important here is that, for example, let's say your children are stressing you out or your partner is really triggering you. So you're not going to get rid of your children to reduce your stress. You might not want to split from your partner to reduce your stress or manage your stress. But there's times when you actually need a strategy to meet those things that are triggering you and your stress in a way that you can engage with them without losing energy, without having that mental, emotional roller coaster that goes on when we're feeling stressed. And so here's where there's times when reducing stress and managing stress is really not the best option, that we really do need to find another attitude and approach to deal with these things differently. So one of the primary reasons that stress gets triggered that has to do with things that you care about are your values. And I find in the work I do that many people have never really stopped to reflect and name and make a list of what they really value, of what really matters to you. And what really matters to you is exactly what can compete and conflict with each other and, create that friction that opens the door to stress. And so where it really kind of reveals itself is you have some core values individually. You have core values within your company and your company culture. And those values, if we take it to the personal level, could be your value for health, your value for faith, your value for family, the value to stay healthy. And then there's the operational values. And so where core values are your long range kind of vision of where you want to go and who you want to be in alignment and congruent with yourself. The operational values are those that come in the day to day and they feel good and they might bring short-term gain or comfort. And so that's when many times what we're choosing in the moment is not aligning with our longer range value. And so an example of this, in a couple of examples, one would be like if you value your family, but at the last minute, at the end of your day, some work project comes across your desk or a phone call comes or a problem you need to take care of. And so you make a decision in that moment, am I going to be late for my kid's birthday dinner and take care of this problem? Or am I going to make a decision of how I can take care of this in a way that I can still be on time? So, it might be you choose to stay late on another day because your work is important and how you do your work is important, and showing up as a team player and professional and all of the investment you make to be successful is a high value. But on the other side of that, how does that impact your time at the gym, perhaps? Or as I said, time with family, or even your nutrition. Perhaps you were going to cook a healthy meal for your family and now you're working late and suddenly you're grabbing fast food or something that's quick and easy. And so we can see that from the time you wake up in the morning until you go to bed at night, all day long, you're making these values assessments and decisions and priorities. And many times where we get caught in our stress around this topic is how we choose one value over another, like an either or black and white thinking, that if I'm choosing this, then I can't have that. But another way would be to really think about how can I say yes and can I still be successful and put the time in at work and still honor the time with my family? And understanding that these choices are going to shift from one day to the next about what matters today in this moment, and having the discernment to make that decision versus feeling guilty or feeling somehow stressed about choosing one thing over the other. And this is times when we might want to look for a plan B. What's my contingency? Can I hand this project off to someone? Can I rearrange to address it in another way or another day? So that kind of seeing the bigger picture, that creative problem solving, that discernment of priorities is not going to happen when you're stressed out and you're in a reactive mindset. And so here's where, when you train, as we're going to do some practices today about how can you just take a pause, reflect for a moment, drop inside, not in your head, but in your belly, to your gut, and listen to the wisdom that's there within you about what can I do to deal with these two things that are very important. So some of the ways that these value conflicts will show up will be when you catch yourself saying, I should do this, I should do that. That's the time when there's probably something where someone wants you to do something that you'd rather really be doing something that has a higher value for you personally. And so catching those should do's is also, where we want to think, well, what do I want to do? And how can I say a yes, and that there might be a time when we have to commit to another. And is there a way that I can actually honor myself and say yes to me and prioritize myself? I also know that many of us will say yes when we really want to be a no. This is what I would call the do-gooder syndrome. And a lot of us have it. We want to be helpful. We want to be of service. We have a high value of supporting others. But how often do we get out of balance with that? And now we're overcommitted with too many things we've said yes to. And then who do we end up saying no to is ourselves. And so that can be very stressful. And so, it's a small little exercise about these values. If you think about your values for health, if I could see your hands, I would say, put your hand up. Think about your value for health, that long-term, who is your best self? What kind of lifestyle are you living that's totally in alignment with health? And in the last 24 to 48 hours, where have you made a choice that didn't support your health value? Your short-term, something that was comfortable or fun or pleasurable in the moment. So let's just say the example is you have a high value about your health and your diet and nutrition, but at the office, someone had a birthday and you decided to have a piece of birthday cake. It's that easy. In the moment, you want to join the celebration and you make a choice. Today I'm going to have the cake because I want to, celebrate this birthday with everyone. But, in the bigger picture, I want to follow my nutrition plan. So that's just a simple example of how often these long-term, very important values compete with those in the moment. Kind of what also is important is connecting with others, relationships, celebration, being included. And all of those are also values. And so we can see how they can be quite interesting to have the discernment about your choices, your free will. What do you choose? So when we look at the new science of stress, I'm coming to you with this workshop with the latest science and how important it is to recognize what they found when they did a big study on people who were both, we would say, very busy. You could call them a type A person. And what they noticed is that how you think about your stress has an impact on your happiness and your success. So in the example, if you take two very busy people and one person is saying, oh my gosh, this is so stressful. This stress is going to kill me. I've got to figure out how to not be so stressed. I've got to make a change, and they're completely thinking stress is bad and harmful. And another person has a mindset of resilience and they say, oh my gosh, I am so busy. How am I going to get through this? I better figure out a plan. And they have nothing on their awareness that stress is harmful or going to harm them. And so what they noticed in these studies is that the people that had the belief that stress is bad and harmful actually had a lot more health problems, what we call comorbidities, those chronic health conditions, and died earlier in their life than those that didn't see stress as harmful, lived longer with fewer health problems. And so that was really telling about how important that mindset piece is and how a resilient person will have a different attitudes towards stress when they have some tools and mindset that they trained into versus the person that says stress is bad, stress is harmful. So what all of you come here today, probably with some deeply entrained, well-worn habits of your stress response. And it's important to recognize that just like you learn habits by repetition, you can unlearn and relearn a new habit and encode the new patterns that gives you some other options so that your stress doesn't have to impact your happiness and your harmony. And that's really the light at the end of the tunnel, is like stress is not gloom and doom, but somehow in our collective, we've all said stress is bad, it's harmful, and look at this long list of diseases that it causes. Well, a big part of that piece with resistance and that attitude of the mindset that stress is harmful is what's causing the cascade of hormones of stress that will perpetuate the health conditions that shorten life. So I want to go into a little bit about, I've given you some hints. There's some different stress responses than the tried and true, well-worn habit that you've been doing. And these take practice, they take mindfulness. And at the heart of stress resilience is mindful awareness. Mindful awareness, I'm not talking about a meditation here. In mindful awareness, it is paying attention on purpose and simply noticing. I'm going to say that again. Paying attention on purpose and noticing. And so if we have some other options to respond to stress in a more productive way, that's where we want to do our practice to train that new response. And so one of the positive ways of dealing with stress is if we can have a mindset to meet the challenge. In meeting the challenge, it actually is a growth mindset, and you can learn from the engagement. So if we think about two examples of meeting the challenge response, one would be the athlete who has the big game. Now that athlete is going to feel the butterflies in the stomach, the sweaty palms, but really they're excited because they want to win the game and they want to play well. So that's the attitude. I want to meet this challenge. I don't know if we're going to win, but I want to play my best. And from that type of mindset, you can actually learn from the engagement. Another example would be when you're studying for tests, or we know people that say, I'm a bad test taker, or, you know, I can't take tests. I study so hard. I never remember. I freeze in the moment. So that is an example of someone who's not really in, I'll meet the challenge. I've studied my best. I hope I do well. I'm going to engage this test, you know, with an attitude of meeting the challenge. And so that person is going to learn more from that test taking process than the person that has that freeze response. And so we'll take a look at that in a minute. So anytime you can meet the challenge with something that's unfamiliar, new, you know, edgy, that's where you want to, that mindset's going to help you actually engage in a more successful way. Now, the 10 and Befriend is one we do quite naturally as human beings. We're wired for this. This is our actual kind of physiology of stress resilience. So in 10 and Befriend, this is when you reach out to someone to share about a challenge or a big decision you need to make or something shocking or unexpected that might have happened. And that 10 and Befriend, as you reach out for support, or if you're the person giving support, it actually cultivates more courage, more confidence, and it dampens fear. So by coming together in community, by picking the phone up and having that conversation with someone, or your faith practice and whatever prayers to some, you know, power that's bigger than you, that you can lean into, this is how we cultivate the 10 and Befriend. And it's based on the hormone of oxytocin. So we know that oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone and has something to do with mothers and babies. But guess what? It's also what we do when we come together to cultivate courage and to find meaning over those big challenges or adverse events. So if you think about the last time you attended a funeral, where everyone came together, they shared their stories, they made sense about their loss and grieved together, that is the 10 and Befriend. or you think about the news with the latest kind of environmental weather disaster, and the people, how they all come together and they share their story about how they pitched in and helped each other. There's the 10 and Befriend. So the person that says, I'm not going to share about my problems, I'm going to figure it out myself, I'm not going to reach out for support, is completely bypassing this channel to, again, create more courage and confidence and dampen the fear. Now, the third stress response is the one that is hardwired and on overdrive. Most of us, when we think of our stress response, are doing this one. And this fight or flight or freeze is an important survival adaptable response. If you're driving in your car later today and you have to suddenly avoid a car accident in an intersection, you want this response. If suddenly the room you're in bursts into flames and you need to get out of the building, if it's survival, you want this response. If you've just had a blow up in your kitchen with your spouse, or you're having a bad day at work, this is like trying to kill a fly with a shotgun. That it's too much, I'm going to say such a strong response, because it puts you in that track of hormones that are the ones that, if they run frequently at high levels, this is the track that is creating the long-term health problems that stress is bad. And this is important to recognize that when you're in the fight, flight, or freeze, you're actually in tunnel vision, and you can only see that one problem right in front of you, and you're unable to learn anything but to identify a risk to your life. Versus going back to the challenge, here you're able to creatively problem solve, you're able to learn from the engagement, and there's a much more empowering response, even though it's something that might be quite feeling stressful. And so there's another piece here. Are we labeling something as anxiety, or are we saying it's actually, I'm excited? I'm excited because I'm going to do this new thing. I can only get better from here. If I go my first time out of the gate, I'm going to see how I do. Versus anxiety can be quite debilitating and limiting, because it throws us into that fight, flight, or freeze reality, where we're really not able to grow with the experience. So I've spent a little time on this slide to really drive home that when we look at our habits, when we look at what the nervous system has wired with stress, how that fight, flight, or freeze is going to tip over the cascade of what we call the sympathetic hormones that really stay up. They flog the organs, bathe the cells, very hard on the body if it's perpetuating for long periods of time. Where the challenge is going to give you the boost of the hormones, and then they come down again. And so it gives us that little quick focus, energy jolt. And then on the parasympathetic track, or we call the rest and digest track, we're much more able to engage in a more productive way with whatever that is in our life. So think about your own typical day. If you're reacting, if you're flying off the handle, if you're triggered, what are you doing for yourself to either find the courage and confidence with 10 and Befriend, or shifting to the mindset of meeting the challenge? So you can start watching your own response and recognizing that you have some other options. Now we're going to talk about the screen burnout. We all know this one after COVID, and I again acknowledge all of you who have taken the time to be on screen for this workshop today, because we know that all of this screen time is our reality, and many of us are still working from home. And it actually means if that your office is across from the kitchen, you're probably working even longer hours than normal. And so we can see here what can happen with so much screen time, how it really can create the procrastination, the distractions, and it impacts our motivation and can really create the default kind of snacking, social media, binging, news addiction, and then the physical discomfort that a lot of us are having from so much screen time. And ultimately, it will impact our productivity. So it's important in this virtual era to have a good strategy for resilience for your screen time. And, this is a set of circumstances we've all seen at the end of this year of COVID. Now, this guy you might relate to. If you don't have a productive way to meet your stress when it's triggered, you could do any or all of these things. So we've got the Netflix binge going. We've got the extra beer or wine, increasing your alcohol consumption has happened for a lot of people. And there's always that emotional eating or that comfort food. And so here's where, if you had a different strategy, the stress trigger is still real. You could still be feeling it, but what's another option so that you don't have to revert to these other behaviors that will disempower you? And what's an option that will actually give you a strategy to make a more empowering choice? This is right here, the crux when we talk about stress resilience, that this is where the practices and the tools and the strategies are the plan B, than going to this other way that has been for many of us a habit. We all have our flavor of how we do this. And I would say this is where that pause can happen, of like noticing what you're feeling, triggered, overwhelmed, whatever it is that the stress experience is like. And in this moment, having that choice, you actually could do something differently. So here's a couple tips for the screen burnout. It's really important to go outside, outdoors, regardless of the climate. About every 60 to 90 minutes, you want to take a walk outside. You want to be in the sun. You want to walk on the earth, feel the elements, get off the screen and outside is important on regular intervals when you're on a long screen day. Also to stand up and stretch, move the body, even, intentionally, you could play some dance music. Maybe you're all in an office together and you could have a group break. Really important to take your lunch off screen. Multitasking and eating on screen is not a good combination, because you can really only be paying attention to one thing at a time. And part of your nutrition, your food intake, is about mindful eating, if you choose that as important to you. And so one of the excuses to take a break is to actually nourish yourself. And then it's really important to prioritize nature and outside time on your non-working days. The recharge that you get from being outside, from being in nature, is it's profound. And it is a priority if you choose to schedule your life with regular outside time. You'll reap the benefits that it will actually enhance your resilience of your indoors time or your screen time. Now, I want to just go through this slide, because one of the sweet spots in the clients I work with are these internal stress triggers. That internal stress is more, I want to say, debilitating or limiting than that busy stress of too much on my plate and, overwhelm of the work. That's one kind of stress that's like your day-to-day busyness factor. But the internal stress that triggers how I lose my space, how do I lose my confidence? Where am I getting my insecurity and triggered? Why is this, every time my button gets pushed here? And so this is what this next few little bullet points are about. And so you might identify with some of these. So tyrants and triggers of internal stress. And tyrants can be people, they can be events. They could be that annoying person who's always borrowing things off your desk. It could be that person that always wants to talk about themselves. Or, the person is always micromanaging you and telling you how to do things. It comes in all kinds of shapes and forms. And what's important is, again, to recognize when these things are happening and that the trigger is real. Again, that drama and the reactivity, how often people in a lot of drama and reaction, they want to pull us into their energy. And so having that clear boundary with yourself of not stepping in, let other people be in their drama. You don't have to be part of it. And how important that is to have those self boundaries. And so with both of these two topics, there's something to recognize that it really is about that other person. It's not about me. And it is about me in that somehow I'm opening the door to allow this person to trigger me or annoy me. And so what are you learning from this other person? And so that's important to just sort of study, how am I opening the door to let this person push my button? And it's really interesting that the way to close the door is to not let your button get pushed. And so that's the greater work, that there's probably something inside of you that doesn't want to be the drama queen, or something inside of you that doesn't want to be the micromanager. There's something there on the inside that's opening the door to these triggers. And so it's valuable to explore what that is. Fear of the unknown is the human being reality. Anytime we're in the unknown or there's uncertainty, it's easy to be triggered with stress and the internal uncertainty of perhaps your work, your income, your relationships, or a new skill or a new project. The unknown comes in many ways. And so having a strategy to deal with fear of the unknown is actually to make it known, take a few steps in that direction. The perceptions of others and how we perceive others. So there's this fallacy that we think everyone needs to love us and like us. And in reality, some people will love us, some people will like us, some people will dislike us, some people might even hate us, and some people will feel neutral because they don't know us well enough. So there's a piece here about not trying to win over the approval of everybody, but just recognizing that there's going to be some people that get you and some people that don't, and to not allow the perceptions of others to influence you, like looking for that outer approval and approval from the outside and getting it from other people, a reward and recognition outside, is a sign that we're really letting others tell us that we're enough, we're good enough. And so the sweet spot is to find that inner approval, like I did my best, this is what I learned, okay, and being able to be true to yourself and not so much driven by how other people perceive you, which is a great work. As a human being, that's a big chunk right there. And then a lot of us are afraid of making mistakes. Making mistakes will hold you back. It's like driving through life with a handbrake on. The more you hold back in fear of making mistakes, the more you're going to miss out from the learning and the growth opportunity. So here's another area of character refinement. I would say all of these are character refinement pieces in your leadership or your inside game of how to get over the fear of making mistakes is actually, an intention of, in the moment, what tools and strategies, again, can I use when I can feel that making mistakes and that fear is holding me back and not letting me move forward and learn from my mistakes. And then again, all of these create that internal doubt and insecurity. And doubt and insecurity are the two kind of realities that no one wants to talk about because we don't want to disclose our truth about how we really feel on the inside. And so this is where I'm just sharing that the bigger stress to be resilient with is our inside stress, because the more we can feel more inner confidence, the more we're going to be able to step into those bigger spaces, have those difficult conversations, or whatever it is that's going to happen. So now we're going to shift and look at some of our strategies. We kind of unpacked all the different ways that stress presents itself. And so when we look at, again, these strategies and tips I'm going to give you today are really what you want to think about taking away from this workshop. They're very simple. They're very doable. They just take practice and a plan to kind of rinse and repeat and plug them into your life on a regular basis so you remember them in the moment. So I've already been disclosing this concept of pause, notice, and choose. Taking that mindful moment that you don't have to just jump right in and react. You actually can just be thoughtful and take a breath. And so let's go over how you do this. And there's another key here, that the question, when there's a values conflict or a tyrant or trigger or whatever it is, here's the $5 question. You don't ask yourself, what am I going to do? Because the minute you go, what am I going to do? That's putting you down the reaction track. What you want to ask is, how will I do this? Because when you ask yourself how, it automatically kind of brings you in, drops you down, and puts you in that creative problem solving to see an option, to see a contingency or a plan B. So start asking yourself, how will I deal with this situation? How do I want to approach this conversation? That's really a secret of being more resilient, is approaching things with the how mind and not the what mind. So Viktor Frankel is quite famous. Many of you might have heard of him or read his book. He has this concept that we're talking about here. And Viktor Frankel was a survival of the concentration camps in Germany, Auschwitz particularly. He was because he's not alive anymore, a neurologist and a psychiatrist. And this is his quote, which is again where we're going today with this concept of how to be, take that pause in the moment. And so we have this quote: being between the stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So there's a piece here about growth and freedom that's in that gap between something happens and how will I deal with this, versus something happens, what am I going to do? You can hear the difference. The what is like, the how is like a, so they're different energies. So I'm going to give you this first tip as we go through these next couple of slides. So for more inner security, for more presence, to be really able to deal with something that's triggering you in the moment, the first step is to breathe and to drop into your center. Your center is your power place. It's the center of gravity. It's the center of your being more present, more able to listen deeper, more able to creatively problem solve. It all comes from this place, not between the ears, but below the belly button. And so we call it your 1 point or your power place. It's also called your dantian. So it's about 3 finger breaths below the navel and a little back inwards towards the spine. It's in your lower belly. And so everyone just take a pause for a moment and find that place with your imagination inside. Finding that 3 finger breaths below the navel, a little bit back towards the spine, and just take a couple breaths into that power place right now. And you can feel it. You feel in your body, out of your head, you feel a little calmer. So breathing into this power place will calm your emotions. It'll help you be more present, more anchored. And so that's the first step, breathing into your power place. You can do that all day long. So anytime you feel triggered, overwhelmed, or spinning in your inner dialogue, take those breaths, drop in, drop down. And breathing deeply into your center. And this deep breaths like this into your lower belly, it actually is another door in to that stress resilience hormone response. That rest and digest happens with deep, slow breathing. And I invite you to come home into your body and into your center. So many of us live between our chin and our eyebrows and trying to figure out and analyze and overthink things. But really the invitation is to drop down into your body, to be centered in your 1 point and to be home. That the more you can come to this place, you'll be able to hold space for others. You'll be able to really calm your emotions and be more present. I've just said that about 3 different ways, so hopefully you get what that is. So here we are, pause, notice, choose. It's so simple. And I would invite everyone after this workshop, make a sticky note, put this on your monitor, pause, notice, choose, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it in your planner. It's just a matter of practicing this so that in the moment, it'll just become automatic. You rewire this. So pause, take a breath. And it's really powerful to breathe down into your lower belly, deep breath. Notice what's happening in this moment. Why am I triggered? Why am I feeling insecure? Why is that person annoying me? Why am I overwhelmed? Whatever it is. Then choose the action that will empower you. So you could be the guy with the remote and the beer and the snacks, or you could choose another option. And so let's look at some options you could do in this choice point, in the space between something happens, you pause, you notice, and then you choose. All right. So I chose this for your group in particular because I know that you have a lot of interaction with people in your network, as well as in your communities and in your apartments. And listening is a skill. Mindful listening is not often taught. And so right here, we can see that mindful listening is also something to practice and train into. It's like exercising a muscle. And so the principle of this listening mindfully comes with that same kind of pause, notice, choose. That when someone is talking to you and you're listening, you actually want to stop whatever you're doing and not multitask. And if it's a particularly challenging conversation or an important conversation, you want to take a few breaths and drop down to your one point, that same power place. You want to listen from this place without thinking, without offering options or problem solving, without thinking of your response back, that you want to just stay neutral and non-judgmental, that you don't have to agree or disagree. You're just listening, holding space in that moment. And then when the person finishes, so you're the listener supporter in this role, then comes the challenger. And so here's the example of challenger. Rather than you jumping in and trying to figure out the problem to solve, you giving advice. We all want to be fixers and helpers by nature. The option here is to co-empower with a challenge that might be, well, you've had that report now for 2 weeks. It's due tomorrow. What's your plan to get it finished? Or it might be, well, you've had this same scenario come up 3 or 4 times now. What's your option to get through it this time? So you're putting it back on the other person to find their own solution, to have their own growth opportunity. And how much more energy conserving it is when you don't have to fix everyone's problems. But in particular with a difficult conversation, or one where someone is just like going off the rails, or they're expressing a lot of emotionality or whatever, anger, frustration, when you hold space for someone like this, it might be just something like, I see, how important it is for you to ventilate your frustration over this. It's neutral, non-judgmental, and how you can diffuse someone who's angry, frustrated, or somehow upset with this. And so I just want to show you a very brief video of how this looks, to listen without thinking of your response, without finding some advice, and to be just holding that neutral, non-judgmental space.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see...
So I'm sure a lot of you are chuckling and relating to that video. how important it was to see the turnaround where he just listened and she could share what she needed to share, and it completely created a whole different energetic between them. And yet by nature, when we're a fixer, a problem solver, a advice giver, it's actually takes that mindful pause to just hold that part back and simply hear what that other person has to share. And again, not agreeing or disagreeing, but just holding that neutral space. It's amazing how you can diffuse a difficult situation or hold your space in a difficult conversation. All right, and then a couple more little slides as we finish up. One of the other areas to think about is that little voice inside called the inner critic, or that warped record that repeats and repeats and repeats. And so think about, for you, it might be, I'm so busy, or I'm so overwhelmed, it's too much. Or a common one, it's like, there's no time, not enough time. You know, many of us are just so tyranted by our time. And so this is a time to notice what these disempowering voices are, and to intentionally insert a different message that is humorous, a little sassy and sarcastic, and it overrides the negative inner critic, and it actually lifts you up emotionally to get out of that negative grinding mindset. It's like defibrillator paddles to the heart to, you know, boot the heart to get that rhythm going in a good pattern. That these mantras, or I call them stress turnaround mantras, actually help you to shift that inner dialogue to one that's more empowering, or at least to have a reboot and a refocus. So the way you do it, it's like, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. And the humorous way is like, I'm so productive. So you can hear how you're kind of sassy and humorous, and it lightens you up. I'm so nervous, I'm so nervous. Instead, I'm so excited. You know, reminding yourself to get off the anxiety cliff, get on the excitement cliff. I hope I do good and I learn a lot. And then there's no time. There's no time. I'm out of time. And there it could be, the time is now. Or you could do Nike's, just do it. You know, if you're like kind of in doubt or resistance. So you can see that for you, again, a sticky note strategy to think of a humorous, and swear words work very effectively for some people, to have that new expression that overrides that repeating negative one that keeps you in the stress loop, caught in that inner dialogue. You want to interrupt that pattern by inserting something else and using the discipline of humor to lighten it up, break up that negative pattern. And then the final piece here is how important it is to manage your energy. That the way you recharge, as I said before, is so essential. That recharge is a priority of how you do have that me time. When you think of all the ways that you're putting your energy outward, giving to this person, giving to that committee, giving to the work, giving to your family, that every time you say yes to someone or something, it's an outflow of energy. And so if that perpetuates, that will actually deplete your tank. And that's where burnout happens, when we don't have a proper way to restore and reboot. And so thinking about your energy as a monetary value, you know, making regular deposits in your checking account, regular deposits in your savings account is an important priority to your health, your happiness, your harmony. And it's like that, it just really supports your resilience when you have that recharge, reboot as part of your lifestyle in whatever way. It could be a hobby, it could be time with family. Like it's different for all of us what that would be, that gives us energy and really helps us kind of free our mind and just be present in the moment. That's where crafting and creative projects, gardening can kind of put us in the zone of timelessness. These are the perfect kind of activities that fill our tank. And so you can see here that all the different things and all the different arenas of where you can actually capture more energy in your life, and revisiting your values. You know, where is relaxation, fun, and pleasure part of your core value system? And you might want to pencil that in. Where can you start responding and not reacting? And at the heart of all of this is this concept of mindful awareness, that at the core of that is this concept of just taking that pause, creating the space in the moment to notice from non-judgmental, neutral perception, and then making that choice of how you're going to support yourself to meet it. This is stress mastery right here. Pause, notice, choose, more mindful awareness, more mindful listening. We had that skill. And so what's important as we close today is just to review that prioritizing your resilience factors starts with your personal values. Make that list. What really matters to you? What's important? What are the values that are bumping up against each other? And is there a contingency plan to say yes and, so you can actually encompass more rather than always feeling like you're choosing one over the other? Sometimes you have to choose, but there might be another plan B. Again, breathe into your power place, into your center, to help you focus and drop in to be more present, more grounded. Tapping into deeper listening, more creative problem solving happens 3 finger breaths below the navel in your center of gravity, not up here. So intentionally being more present, it starts with the breath. And then we talked about the pause, notice, choose, and with the invitation to put some sticky notes around and think of how you want to adopt this as a practice in your day, and how as a little experiment, do an experiment and see if it supports you to be more responsive, less reactive. And then we talked about that listener, supporter, challenger, about how to truly listen and hold space for someone without trying to jump in with our answer, give advice, or problem solve. So as we close today, looking at this butterfly, you've seen the butterfly image on a lot of the slides. And really we have the comfort zone, the devil you know, and then the destination of transformation of the life you really want, that is about that more passion, more energy, more happiness, better health. And so many of you are on the fence, right? That on one side is the comfort zone that's so familiar, and the other side is the unknown of what I really want. And so recognizing in the middle is where stress happens, where you might feel vulnerable, where you might lack a little confidence in making change, or you might face your fear of letting go of what's the familiar. And so this is where the greatest growth can happen. And this is where stress is really a leverage to support your growth, and recognizing that the butterflies fly from the stress on their wing as they're pushing out of their cocoon. That if we help that butterfly break free from the cocoon, it will die, it will not be able to fly. And so in my sessions with my clients, we explore, where are you now stuck on the fence, and how can we make a plan to help you start moving over towards that destination of the life that you really love, and how not to leave the life you have, but to find a way that has more meaning and purpose and more strategy to meet the parts that are so challenging. And so now, just a reminder, if you want to download my free ebook, How to Grow From Your Stress, here's my contact information if you have more questions. My website has a slew of free resources there you're welcome to visit. And I'll turn it back over, I think, to John for any questions that you all might have.
Sara, thank you so much for that wonderful information. This was just a great session. I knew it was going to be. I'm sure that you've all gained some valuable strategies for better managing your stress, or maybe even helping others manage their stress both at home and at work. We are going to ask if you've got any questions. Sara has agreed to take a few questions, and I know we've got some that are already coming. I'm going to start reading them, but if you do have a question, feel free to go to the Q&A or the chat feature, and I'm going to start fielding those questions for Sara. Well, one's actually for James and those of us at NAA. Is this session going to be available to rewatch? I would love to have a copy for my employees. Such wonderful information that I would love to share.
Absolutely, John. This will be, whole session has been recorded, and next week it'll both be posted to our website and to our YouTube channel. So yes.
Okay, so that takes care of that question. Any advice for someone with ADD ADHD?
Yes. Because I work a lot with the VA and the veterans, and there is a lot of that type of focus challenge. And what's important to recognize that a lot of times we think it's negative to have the ADD and ADHD, but actually it's a hyper vigilance of how you're able to catch everything rather than the filter of reining in the one focus. And so what can support you is to start with that, just simply coming home. And every so often when you start shifting your focus everywhere and it's impacting getting something done, that if you just take a few centering breaths to just keep bringing yourself back into the moment, simply noticing where you're going off track in these other distractions, that it's actually a way that you can train that you are in control of in the moment where your focus is. And it's also about allowing yourself those regular breaks of that intensive focus to really allow yourself to kind of free think and expand. So it's a matter of intentionally centering yourself periodically. And it's a gift. It's not a negative thing. And so that's you're able to do multiple streams, hold multiple attentions. A lot of people are down on themselves for that symptomology, but when you can see the gifts of it, you want to lean into the positive of how it supports you, and what you're learning from it is what my invitation is for you.
Well, Sara, again, I can't thank you enough on behalf of everyone that attended today's webinar, and those of us at the National Apartment Association and with the Mental Health Subcommittee. Thank you so much for your time today. James, I know that you've got some things. We did have something else in the chat here. If I could, just real quickly, do you believe it is possible, even with PTSD, to learn a new and healthy way to respond, not react to your triggers, perhaps learn to stop triggering and have the capability of rewiring yourself to respond and not react and be pushed to the past?
Yes, absolutely. That's the work we're doing in the VA with their whole health concept, because it's such a prevalent challenge. It's practice. It's having the discipline and a plan. How many times a day will you do it to start? That would be like another workshop. You know, how to structure your plan, that it's something you're practicing on a regular basis with intention, so that it becomes wired as the habit, and then it becomes more natural the more you do it. Think about learning how to ride a bike, how many times you fell over before you actually could make it down the street. You know, that this is similar. It takes practice and that repetition to hardwire the new pattern, and having that strategy. Mm-hmm.
You know, Sara, just real quickly, you've mentioned the Veterans Administration, and I'm not ashamed to admit this. I am a mental health patient. I get my mental health care from the Veterans Administration. You know that. I've shared that with you. And I find that question about triggers to be very interesting, because they do teach us how to manage ourselves through those triggers. So that's a very interesting question that someone posed. And I thank you for the work that you do with the Veterans Administration. We're going to take one more question here out of respect of everyone's time. So repetition and practice could accomplish this.
Yeah, like it's about having a plan that's structured, but with some flexibility, so that you are keeping it front and center to remember, oh, here's my new strategy. And I know that particular trigger slide because those are the clients I work with. And so that's where I'm familiar with those flavors of the internal stress. Is usually a very high achieving individual that's pushing, striving, they're very successful on the outside, but on the inside, there's that kind of hidden insecurity or doubt that's constantly creating the internal stress on the inside. I'm feeling that inner calm, outer confidence is definitely something that's an outcome from coaching, partnering together to create a plan for change.
Well, Sara, thank you again. We've all got a lot of great information from you today, and we just really appreciate it. So, James, I'm going to throw things back over to you.
Terrific. Now, Sara, if you do me a kind favor and just go back 2 slides.
Oh, sorry, did I go too fast?
Right there. Perfect. Thank you. No, again, Sara, first of all, I want to thank our host, John Sons, as well as you, Sara, for really an outstanding webinar. So for additional information, you're most welcome to visit the website that was developed by National Apartment Association in conjunction with 3 sister associations. The website is entitled COVID-19 Rental Housing Support Initiative, and it features an entire support area devoted to mental health. There you'll find a resource library categorized under the topics of isolation, anxiety, resiliency, and financial stress. And the URL appears below. Next slide, please. Furthermore, you may also visit NAA's website for best practices, webinars, and other operations resources addressing mental health issues in our industry. Next slide, please. So finally, again, on behalf of John and Sara and myself, I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. We absolutely value your membership and appreciate your attendance. So all, have a great afternoon.